They are athletes that can change a program, define a team, and alter the course of college football. From high school to Heisman and beyond, the future starts now. The Campus Insiders Signing Day Special. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ray Crawford, and as National Signing Day begins, these are the top 25 projected classes as ranked by Scout.com. Michigan had 4 5-star recruits a year ago in the second best class. It looks like they'll just get 1 5-star this year. Stanford has one of the smallest classes among the top 20, but David Shaw just got a huge 5-star recruit to commit this morning. More on that in just a moment. Despite a disappointing season in Athens, the Bulldogs are still expected to get a top 15 class. If all goes according to plan, Mark Richt will sign 10 4-star recruits today. How about the Auburn Tigers? They're about to have their 4th top 10 recruiting class in the last 5 years. All that talent finally lived up to expectations last season. Now even more coming into the pipeline. But as the day begins, Alabama sits on top with the best incoming class in college football. Meanwhile, Butch Jones is almost recruiting an entire football team. 30-plus players expected to commit. Then there are the national champion Seminoles, Buckeyes, and Notre Dame. Scout.com's Brian Doan is here. Brian, the top uncommitted recruit is Adoree Jackson of California. Which way do you think he's leaning?
Well, I think right now he's heading toward USC. You know, Florida's made a late run with him. UCLA is involved, but I think SC is kind of the team to beat.
Brian, no surprise that Auburn High School senior Rashaan Evans will choose this morning between his hometown Tigers and Alabama. Who's the favorite?
It goes back and forth. You know, sometimes you think it's going to be Auburn, where both of his parents went. Alabama makes a push. He's from Auburn, Alabama. The late push was for Auburn.
How about receiver Malachi Dupree from New Orleans? You think he'll stay at home and play for LSU?
I do. That was the word we got late last night, that he was going to wind up staying right at LSU. Hey, he's a great athlete, 40-inch vert.
Florida receiver Erman Lane reopened his recruiting last month. Who's the front runner now?
Florida State. I think everybody's looking at it as Florida State's the team to beat. They'll be absolutely stunned if it's not there.
Plus, we just found out Solomon Thomas out of Texas is committed to Stanford. What are the Cardinals adding?
Well, the Cardinals are adding a great athlete who's got tremendous burst. He's a guy that's so athletic for his size that he can play multiple positions. You know, a guy that can drop and play linebacker and go into coverage a little bit.
Great stuff. It's the start of a big day for high school recruits across the nation, and we've got it covered on Campus Insiders all day long. You know our college analyst, Doug Chapman, managing editor, Pete Futak, and we welcome into the studio from Scout.com, Brian Doan. Thanks for being with us. Kind of like your Super Bowl today, huh?
It is. Big day today.
It is a big day. Doug, you were once in the shoes of these young men, waking up, getting the sleeps out of your eyes. A big day lies ahead. What's going through these young men's minds as they wake up and get set to make a huge decision that's going to impact the next 3 to 5 years of their lives?
Well, there's a lot more media involved now than when I was playing. You know, I came out in the late 90s, but, you know, it's the first business decision that these kids are making in their young lives. These kids are 17, 18 years old. I was 17 years old, and my parents were a big influence on me. And not only are these kids now thinking about academics, they're thinking about, I want to go to the NFL. So which one of these schools puts me in the best possible position? So it's the first big decision in these guys' young lives.
Few we've seen for the last how many ever years, Texas is the #1 team in the Lone Star State. Now it's Texas A&M in terms of recruiting the last 2 years. And despite losing their last 2 games of the season, Ohio State is still getting top shelf talent. How are these 2 programs doing it?
Oh, well, first of all, Ohio State just recruits itself, but throw Urban Meyer into this mix and all of a sudden you've got something amazing. Last year was a lot about the defensive backs. Can they pump up that secondary? This year, it's really kind of about that defensive front and the linebackers, the pass rushers from the outside. Sam Hubbard, Kyle Berger, Dante Booker. These guys are superstar talents. Receiver, Curtis Samuel is the one guy that everyone wants. Johnny Dixon also a good one. A loaded class of wide receivers. For Texas A&M, who doesn't want to play in this offense at this point? Kyle Allen at Scout.com's #1 quarterback. Devontae Noyle, the #1 wide receiver. And a loaded group of receivers. But also they've paid some pretty good attention to the defensive front as well. Lots of pass rushers. Myles Garrett, Jarrett Johnson. This is a very, very strong group overall. With everything kicking in for this receiving core, I think all of a sudden this offense is going to keep on exploding.
Brian, we plan on hearing from Miami coach Al Golden coming up later today. He had a couple of commitments leave him when he was rumored for that head coaching job at Penn State, but how has he been able to salvage a good class at Miami?
He's been able to salvage a good class because when you look at it, you know, doesn't have the sanctions to deal with anymore. There's no more questions on what's going on, and he's a very personable guy. That's why Penn State was on him. That's why every time a job opens up, you're going to hear Al Golden's name, because he's a guy that he connects well with recruits, and he's a guy that he does a good job of selling the program, and he plays an exciting brand.
Well, we are just getting started here. 9 o'clock in the East, 8 Central, 6 in the Pacific. The start again of a big day, and they already got good news out in Palo Alto as a 5-star Solomon Thomas committed. We're just getting started, as we mentioned here on CI. Coming up at 11 o'clock, you are going to witness Denzel Ward, Chicago Prep standout. He is going to make his college choice. Will it be USF, Syracuse, or Vanderbilt? Then at 1 o'clock, it's our National Signing Day special where we will examine the winners and losers in recruiting today and which new freshmen will be able to help right away. We'll take a look. Plus, Miami head coach Al Golden will join us when we recap the day at 3 o'clock. A number of FBS schools have made coaching changes, including Texas and USC. How have Charlie Strong and Steve Sarkisian done in Austin and LA? We'll take a look when we return.
With the newly available 410 horsepower twin turbo.
Let's go live to our insiders on both campuses for the latest developments.
With the Name Your Price tool, we build a policy around your budget. Now I'm gonna smash a guitar! Rock and roll! We're gonna need a dustpan and a broom!
Once mighty powerhouse programs, it was 8 years ago Texas and USC met in the national championship. Now with new head coaches on both campuses, optimism is rising with the expectations of a return to college football glory. And for now, anyway, the Longhorns are no longer the top dog in the state of Texas. It's Texas A&M, Brian, and we've seen Kevin Sumlin do an amazing job with recruiting. Meanwhile, though, Charlie Strong comes from Louisville, not a real strong background in recruiting. The best class he ever had there was ranked 33rd by Scout.com. So what are we seeing, Brian, in the approach that Charlie Strong is having now at Texas, and what can we expect from him in the future?
I think one of the things you're going to look at is how much can he dig into Texas. He's a guy that made his living when he was at Louisville. He made his living in South Florida. When he was with Florida as a coordinator, he made his living in South Florida. What's he going to do in Texas? You're not going to know that until next season, because when Mack Brown left, one of the things that Mack wanted was, hey, all the kids that were committed to him are going to stay committed. Right now they have 17 kids committed from the state of Texas. Let's see what happens next year once Charlie gets his, and his guys get involved and get, digging in the 2015 class.
Well, no one will argue with his ability to develop players. He was able to take those recruits at Louisville and win a lot of football games. The flip side of that example, you've got Lane Kiffin, who was a great recruiter, just couldn't get the wins on the football field. Just 10 in his last 18 games, 10-8 over that stretch. How well has his replacement, Steve Sarkisian, done 2 months on the job now?
Well, ask me that in about 3 or 4 hours, because they're on the hook right now. They could get 3 5-stars right now. They haven't had a commitment since January 6th. For him, again, it's just getting familiarity with guys in Los Angeles. He recruited there when he was at Washington. He's a very personal guy like Lane. The one thing is they're just coming out of the scholarship reduction penalties there too, which is what Kiffin dealt with a lot. But with Sarkisian, again, just like with Charlie, it's going to be what happens in the 2015 class. Can the kids, especially in talent-rich Southern California, just lock in and go, say, hey, I want to stay home and help rebuild SC?
Doug, 2 big programs, 2 huge fan bases that want to win. So who has more pressure on them to win and become a national title contender?
Texas. I got to go with Texas. I'm going to start with Texas. I mean, if you look at it, what the program with the job Mack Brown did there, he put that program back on the map. And with the way things ended and the way the talent they've had there over the past few years, they have not lived up to expectations. Charlie Strong comes in, you said, has not had the best resume with recruiting because he's been at Louisville. Now he's at Texas, has the resources, but he's got to go against Browse down at Baylor. He's got to go against Sumlin at A&M. Those are his biggest competition right now. He's got to win the in-state battles. He's got talent on that roster. he's got to coach that talent, get more talent in there, and win games. I think he's got more pressure on him.
I think on the field this year, yes, I will give it to you because they're coming back loaded. There's no excuse for Texas last year. There's no excuse for Texas this year. In terms of today, the most pressure on him is Steve Sarkisian because the one thing about, as Ray alluded to, Lane Kiffin, a fantastic recruiter. Ed Ordrin, they booted him to the curb. What was he great at? He was a peerless recruiter. And now you've got Sarkisian, old 7-win Sark. Can he recruit at USC? We can recruit at USC. Anybody can recruit there. You've got to land these 4- and 5-star players, especially today. He's got to do this. If he doesn't, then all of a sudden, everyone's going to start chirping a little bit. Charlie Strong has a little bit of a honeymoon period, at least in this recruiting period, because he was brought on late. Sarkisian's got to rock and roll today.
Charlie Strong does not have a honeymoon period.
The
pressure's been on him since the day he signed that contract.
Yeah, they need to win a national
Since the day he signed that contract, he wakes up with pressure.
Compared to Sark, if he doesn't sign Adoree Jackson, all of a sudden there's a big problem there.
A lot of pressure. Big national programs like USC and Texas, they can go into any living room in the country and recruit the top 5-star talent, much like they can do at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly about to wrap up his 5th recruiting class. Let's take a look around at some other campuses across the country, starting with the Fighting Irish.
Alan Pinkett here, Notre Dame insider. Well, it's shaping up to be another good recruiting season for the Fighting Irish out of South Bend. Most services have them ranked as the 9th or 10th best recruiting class. They've got a number of 4- and 3-star candidates, maybe 1 5-star, the jewel being defensive lineman Andrew Trombetti, an early enrollee. They have really solidified the depth on the offense and defensive lines, and they look like a good team for next year and for the future.
Doug Franz here, your Arizona State campus insider for recruiting in Tempe. And Manny Wilkins is the big name. 6'3" dual threat quarterback. But what's bigger is not his play, his ability to recruit. And yes, he's one of the recruits. 17 different kids were invited in with Manny for a total of 18 by ASU. One recruiting weekend. Why? Because they knew Manny could get the job done to close some deals. This last weekend, the big deal was defense. Last visits by 6 different defenders. ASU has a good class, but if they can close on DeAndre Clark and Dalvin Stuckey, they'll feel like they have a great class.
Hey guys, it's Chris Plank, your University of Oklahoma insider, and what a recruiting class Bob Stoops has put together. Since the win over Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, the momentum has been incredible behind the OU class, with the addition of 5-star running back Joe Mixon, believed to be the most talented running back to join the Oklahoma fray since Adrian Peterson. But of course, if you play running back at Oklahoma, you're always compared to Adrian Peterson. This is a class that is heavy on skilled players, some big-time wide receivers, including Dallas Todd, a 4-star wide receiver, and offensive linemen, 4 offensive linemen. Huge recruiting class for Oklahoma.
Hi everybody, Joe Rexford here, Michigan State Insider. Mark D'Antonio may have his highest rated recruiting class yet. He has typically been in the 30s nationally. It has not stopped Michigan State from winning 42 games the past 4 years, including the most recent Rose Bowl. But this could be a top 25 class, largely because of talent on both sides of the line. Brian Allen, Enoch Smith, Brian Allen's an offensive lineman, Enoch Smith a defensive tackle, both from Illinois, kind of a new recruiting ground for Michigan State. Spartans did lose Chris Durkin, quarterback recruit to Virginia Tech, so there's no quarterback in this class. But a lot of skill otherwise. And coming right up here in a few minutes, they may find out about a 5-star prospect coming to East Lansing. Malik McDowell, defensive lineman from Southfield, Michigan. He's deciding between the Spartans, Michigan, Florida State, and Ohio State. Just had an official visit to Ohio State. Florida State has made a late push. Michigan was the early leader. Michigan State has been the recent leader. So all 4 camps have reason to think they can get him. But if the Spartans can get Malik McDowell, then this would certainly be a top 25 class.
All right, Joe, thanks very much. So, Brian, as you look at the day it's going to pan out, what are you going to be watching for today?
Well, I can't wait to watch what goes on in Southern California and what happens. Damian Mama, Juju Smith, Adoree Jackson, you're talking about 3 5-star kids that all have SC high on the radar. That makes SC's class or breaks it.
Doug, among the big-time power programs is we take a look there at Adoree Jackson, who's going to make a decision, the California native. That's coming up later on today. Among the big-time powerhouse programs, Doug, where do you see the biggest openings to be filled by August?
The biggest openings are at the quarterback position, and these aren't just any quarterbacks. You look at Alabama, they lose A.J. McCarron. Clemson loses Taj Boyd. Johnny Manziel's going to Texas A&M, and Mettenberger going to LSU. These are 4 guys that are going to be playing on Sundays that meant everything to their program. Now, you've got guys in place, but you really have to hit home runs if those guys you have in place aren't the guy. Look at Texas A&M. They've got Jokel there at backup, but Kyle Allen could be the guy that fits that mold that Kevin Sumlin wants more than a Jokel type of guy. McCarron, you've got Sims backing him up. David Cornwell's coming in 6'5", 230-pound, big arm. You never know what they're going to do with Kiffin down at Alabama. So quarterback, those are the positions I look at in those big-time programs. They've got to fill those slots early.
Few, who are you going to be keeping an eye on today?
Baylor's one of those teams that we saw. Art Brown's been able to do a great job with what he had. Now he's bringing in the talent. He's getting guys away from places like Texas A&M. He's able to hang with the big boys in the in-state. The other team I'm looking at, Kentucky. Look at what Mark Stoops has been able to do. He is bringing in a real class of SEC talent players. This is not just a kind of a little engine that could at this point. They are going toe-to-toe with the SEC big boys, and he's winning some of these battles. Kentucky is this year's Ole Miss.
All right, guys, we're off and running. Signing day is underway. Thanks very much for your insight. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Campus Insiders throughout the day. Also at Brian Doan Scout, right? On Twitter as well. He'll have updates of National Signing Day. We will see you next at 11 o'clock when Chicago Prep standout Denzel Ward will make his college choice live and exclusively only on CampusInsiders.com. We'll see you in a couple hours.